For me, the Shred Druid was definitely one of the worst leveling experiences I've ever had, any class, any build, for any era of Diablo, and I want to talk about why.
Hey everybody, it's Gamer Gramps here, and today we're going to be specifically talking about Shred for the Druid. More specifically than that, the Poison variant, because that's the way the skill is meant to be played. We're going to let Raxx do the talking here, and we're going to live in a hypothetical dream world where he didn't listen to his Twitch chat, and he actually tried rabies with it while he was leveling up. So all I'm going to do is literally let him talk and cook, and I'm going to take my level 1 to Curator kill, and I'll just speed it up, and it'll be going on in the background while he talks. And just imagine an alternate reality. We could have been playing this sooner, because I only stumbled across it after I played it in the PTR myself and had so much fun that I then started experimenting and didn't figure this build out completely until the last week or so. But anyways, without any further ado, here's Raxx.
For me, the Shred Druid was definitely one of the worst leveling experiences I've ever had, any class, any build, for any era of Diablo, and I want to talk about why. Hi everyone, it's Raxx. Here comes the second video in a series I'd like to call Super Garbage Builds for Season 5, and let's try to make them great. So yesterday we did the Chain Lightning Sorcerer. Hopefully we can get some changes there. Now chat was begging me to do Shred Druid. They say that this build is absolutely in shambles. So I actually started at level 1 and I leveled up to 55 to get kind of the experience of what it feels like as an introductory to this class. And then we talked about the end game a lot. There were a lot of Druid mains there. Boiler stopped by, shout out to Boiler. He's the Druid lead for Maxroll. And then we made this 2-page document about Shred, and let's talk about it. So let's talk about what works about Shred. So the dashing of Shred, how you can keep moving around and hitting everything, that feels really good. And the skill itself looks cool. These are the only things out of any aspect that I could think of that actually work with this build. For me, the Shred Druid was definitely one of the worst leveling experiences I've ever had, any class, any build, for any era of Diablo, and I want to talk about why. So first of all, the damage that Shred does doesn't work at all. The main ways that you buff damage is from a Stormclaw power. It gives you spread lightning damage when you crit. And then Blurred Beast, which is increased damage to poisoned enemies. So Stormclaw is actually barely noticeable. And that's probably because in the early game you have very bad crit, but in the end game it gets better. And if you just compare what it can do compared to, I don't know, anything else in the game, anything. Blizzard Sorcerer, Dust Devil Barb, even Firewall Sorcerer, a Victimize or a Shadow Imbue Rogue, even a Pulverized Druid. Same class, different build. A Minion Necro, a Blood Surge Necro, a Corpse Explosion Necro. Anything. Everything outclasses it in terms of AoE, and it requires a legendary power for you to even have this. Then you go to single target, and Envenom is one of the passives, thinks it gives you multiplicative damage to your multiplicative critical strike damage. And then Unsatiated is another one of the legendary powers. They feel very clunky to keep up, not very noticeable in the early game. You don't have great resources. You have to use your generator all the time. And then it's pretty reliant on poisoning, which you have to get from Toxic Claws or Poison Creeper or Rabies, but nobody takes Rabies. We're going to talk about that in a second. Or you have to get legendary powers for your werewolves to spread Rabies. And then even when you get these things activated, it's very underwhelming. I had the hardest time clearing the capstone. I had the hardest time clearing killing the Curator using this versus using anything else. Your early game resources are a big problem, as we kind of alluded to earlier. You run out of spirit instantly, and you won't have access to Umbral right away. It takes forever to get your spirit boons going. You're not going to have good rolls on your gear. The tempering sucks early game. You just can't continue shredding, and you consistently lose this legendary power, assuming that you've even found it. The resources are a problem. your defenses are a big problem. And honestly, the reason why your defenses are a problem is because it requires you to get in the middle and you don't have any damage. So I dive into the middle, shred, teleporting around. The monsters are still alive. If I don't get out immediately, I'm going to die. And then early game, Poison Creeper seems to vastly outdamage Shred. And in order to use Poison Creeper, you also have to dive into the middle. So I'm always in the middle. Everything is not dying very quickly, and it puts me in super dangerous situations. For that reason, my defenses felt bad. The legendary powers, as we kind of stated above, Blurred Beast, Stormclaw, they're very underwhelming. They probably feel a lot better when you have all of your powers later on in the game, but that doesn't help most people who don't get Super VAR very quickly when you're playing Diablo 4. Here's another kind of Diablo 4 tragedy, is it has bad synergy with rabies, in that a lot of people don't even take rabies, at least while leveling up. In the Diablo 4 alpha, which almost nobody saw, it was like a closed alpha, rabies was godly. And it was so godly that Blizzard was afraid and they nerfed it for the beta, and rabies has never been the same since. I think it's gotten a lot of buffs since then, and it's still far away from what it used to be. And we need a much better synergy here. Like, this is the build where we should be super excited to take rabies and use rabies, but that's just not what happens. So we need it to be far more lucrative and synergize much better than what it currently does. Then the Shred upgrades offer practically zero choice. Okay, so if we look at Shred here and go up to it, look at this upgrade. Shred's second and third attacks also perform a dash, and then we get critical strike damage increased by 30%. Well, there is pretty much no universe, unless you're making like an Uber boss build where you don't need to dash at all, but maybe still even in the Uber boss builds, where you could give up this dash. This is pretty much the thing that makes it feel really good. So losing the dash is just unthinkable in this build. So why is it a choice? It doesn't make sense that it's a choice. It needs to be built into the actual skill. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. So now let's get into a million ideas on how we can make Shred better. Now, again, these ideas are purposely very high level because Blizzard is going to choose how they actually want to change things and implement them. It doesn't do me any good to drill down with my little magnifying glass and give a super specific solution, because Blizzard likes to come up with their own answers. But let's talk high level about some things. The dash upgrade should not be a choice. It should be built into Shred, because you're never going to play Shred without it. That could open up another upgrade for Shred, which could be very interesting, and they could use that option to solve some of Shred's problems. I think you move the dash upgrade just into base Shred. This to me is kind of a no-brainer. So you already give us a power called Stormclaw, which makes Shred AoE and do lightning damage. But you want to know what they didn't put in it? They didn't make Shred a storm skill when it does that. And if they had done that, it would open up a lot of avenues for Shred. Now, they don't have to do this. Some druids commented, well, everything turns into a storm skill and it opens up all these possibilities, and I'm sick of that solution. That's fair. But you already have a power that makes it do AoE lightning damage, and you didn't make it a storm skill. So this is such a low-hanging fruit that could help Shred. And if not, maybe you could redesign Stormclaw to do bleeding stuff or some other thing. But the fact that you made it do lightning damage without making it a storm skill is very strange. As we said earlier, Shred needs to synergize far better with rabies. You might not believe me, but there was a universe when rabies was godly. We need to make rabies great again. One of the best things Blizzard could do is go back and look at the alpha and look what rabies used to do. Shred is so far behind that I think a massive buff here is in order. Improve the Shred legendary powers. When we took things like Blurred Beast or Stormclaw, they're not nearly as impactful as they should be. Stormclaw is the big AoE thing. everything in the game that I can think of has better AoE. Everything. So it's just not impactful enough at all. Here's another one that I think is a no-brainer. The Druid Tempers need help. The shape-shifting finesse has 6 choices. You're never going to get what you want, and then you have to get another Temper in World Tier 4. I think you have to break this up into 2. This is, it's actually crazy. There's no way it can stay like this. Another thing is the other option for Shred is increased crit chance, which is very good, especially it's very good for a low-level Druid. But what I keep hearing from all the endgame Druids is crit chance is actually not what you need in the endgame. And then it would be a much higher damage increase if they could get stuff like some of the other builds get, like chance for Shred to cast twice, or just increasing its damage, because Druids do have a lot of access to crit chance, which will help them with things like Envenom. So we need another look at the Druid Tempers. It's in big trouble. Here's a buff that I think Blizzard should do that will help every Druid build. So let's understand something. Druids currently are the worst leveling class. They're the slowest. I have 25 level 100s this season. I've been speedrunning them a lot. I think Druid is the slowest. So they're the slowest, and they could use that. They could use help in the early game, and they have by far the worst class quest. You have to go do an entire stronghold, then you have to do a quest chain, which takes you out, and then you have to do a second thing, and then you have to acquire 400 spirit offerings. I just leveled up 1 to 55, and I didn't actually level up that fast because I was purposely trying to use just Shred here. And look how many I have. Okay, I do have enough. I did finally get 400 at level 55. So I essentially completed my class quest maybe a little bit earlier than 55. It just takes way too long to do all of this. So since they just buffed spirit boons, and since the spirit boons would have really helped me, I think they should change the spirit offerings to 50 instead of 100 and cut it in half. That way people can get their spirit boons much earlier, and it will help all Druid leveling builds. It doesn't change anything in the end game. You already have all the spirit boons. This is just to help low-level Druids. The final thing that they could look at is Lupine Ferocity. So they just buff this. They just buff this to be every third werewolf hit critically strikes, and it does 70% increased damage and 140 against injured enemies. But if ever you were going to take this passive, it's essentially probably going to be on Druid. And Lupine Ferocity is pretty good in the early game when your crit chance sucks. But in the later game, people usually take Ursine Strength for 30% increased damage all the time. Or the very powerful Bestial Rampage for 30% attack speed and 50% increased damage. Kind of the annoying thing about Bestial Rampage is it requires you to shapeshift properly, so some people don't like that. But both of these, I think, still have a higher output than the buffed version of Lupine Ferocity. If we're not going to take Lupine Ferocity on the endgame Shred build, I don't know when we ever will. So what could we do about that? Notice the final part of it. You do 140% increased damage against injured enemies. Well, that's pretty much the worst case scenario we could have hoped for. First of all, they could change it to something completely different, like vulnerable enemies. But if they wanted to keep the same idea, you could switch it to doing the damage to healthy enemies instead. That way, when you walk in and you get that third hit in the crit, it might just blow up the whole pack, instead of waiting for them to get hurt and then luckily hitting the damage to execute them. But when they're that low, the damage might have been enough to kill them anyway. So even switching that to healthy would be a big buff. Or if you really want to get frisky, actually change it to both. Injured and healthy might make it even better. And that's the kind of buff that Lupine Ferocity might need to actually make people take it over the other two passives. So do I think if Blizzard makes every single one of these changes that Shred is going to be the greatest build ever? Well, I guess it would depend on how they improve the legendary powers. I guess it would depend. I guess maybe, but probably not. but I think this would be an excellent starting point. I think everyone should get the dash. I think it should be a storm skill, opens up a lot of build ideas. We need to be able to use rabies much better. The powers need to be improved. The tempers suck. How many of you guys bricked your druid tempers last season? I bet tons of you. Spirit boons would help the early game, and lupine ferocity, it'd be cool if we actually took it. So this has been my little workshop day 2. Yesterday we tried to fix Chain Lightning Sorcerer. Today we're trying to fix Shred Druid. We'll send this over to Blizzard. What do all of you Druid mains think out there? Do you think that these would be good changes for Shred? I would be very interested to hear what your ideas are.
Okay, you know what they say, right? Be careful what you wish for. No, in all seriousness though, I'm sure he's going to be fine with this if he were to ever see it, which he probably won't. But anyway, I mean, like literally today in his stream when he was practicing with the sorcerer and he made a character for Asmongold and his chat wanted him to do it bald and he did it. Clearly he's got a sense of humor. I don't think he's gonna lose any sleep if he were to ever somehow magically see this. But anyway, and if he did, I think he'd probably want to try it out, and in season 5 he'd probably have a whole lot of fun doing it. But that being said, I'll pin a link in the comment section to his original video, to a little preview build video that I did, because I'm waiting till I have footage of the actual live game to release a full-fledged build. But I have a Paragon thing all set up. I have a whole build planned out. I just need the footage to go with it, and that will come tomorrow when the season launches. And also too, I did react to this video and go point by point and address it. And in that video, I do explain things. So it's a bit longer, but you might want to check it out if you find it interesting. It'll be pinned in that comment section too. But other than that, let me know. What are you thinking about Shred? Did you try it on the PTR? What else are you excited about season 5? Anywho, I'm just going to shut up now and hopefully I see you in the next video.